There is a moment that comes without announcement. You are in a room full of people who need something from you. Their calm, their direction, their reassurance, their certainty that things will hold together. And you give it. You have always given it. You have given it so many times and with such consistency that no one in the room thinks to ask how you are sustaining it. They assume it comes naturally. They assume this is simply who you are. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this: you have begun to assume it too. This video is about that moment. Not about anger. Not about insults or enemies or anyone who has treated you badly. It is about something quieter and far more erosive: the slow replacement of your actual self by the role you agreed to perform, and the Stoic understanding of what it costs, and how to recover what was quietly surrendered. Teaching 1. The role is not the self. Epictetus began his entire philosophy with a distinction that most people spend their lives ignoring. He drew a line, clean and unwavering, between the things that belong to us and the things that do not. On one side, our judgments, our values, our will, our character. On the other, reputation, the expectations of others, the roles assigned to us by circumstance or by the needs of the people around us. The role of the strong one, the capable one, the one who does not require support because everyone else is already using both your hands. That role belongs on the second list. It is not yours. It was placed on you, or you picked it up when no one else reached for it, and over time it settled so completely onto your shoulders that you stopped feeling its weight as external. You felt it as identity. Epictetus taught that this confusion is the root of most human suffering. Not dramatic suffering, not the suffering of catastrophe. The quiet, persistent suffering of a person who has organized their entire interior life around a performance that was never truly asked for, and who has long since forgotten where the performance ends and the person begins. The role is not the self. Knowing this is not a comfort. It is the beginning of a demand. Teaching 2. The hidden cost of invisible labor. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, who taught philosophy not as abstraction, but as daily practice, returned again and again to a question that most philosophies skip. Not what should we endure, but what are we enduring that we should not? He understood that strength, when it becomes chronic and automatic, and performed on behalf of everyone except yourself, is not virtue. It is a transaction, and the terms of that transaction are rarely examined clearly. What you have been giving has a name in the quiet hours. It is not time. Time is the visible portion. The invisible portion is attention that was owed to your own inner life and redirected outward. It is the emotional processing that never happened because you were busy processing everyone else's. It is the self-knowledge that was deferred and deferred again until the deferral became the default. Musonius taught that philosophy is not decoration. It is the daily act of returning to your own mind as if it were a place that requires maintenance, a place that cannot simply run unattended while you keep everything else running. When you neglect the interior work, you do not simply fall behind. You begin to disappear from your own life. You become very reliable and very absent simultaneously. That is the hidden cost. Not collapse, not crisis, absence. Teaching 3. The self that was replaced. Epictetus once described a person who had shaped their character entirely around the approval and dependency of others as a person living inside a borrowed house. The furniture was arranged to please visitors. The rooms were kept in order for the comfort of guests. But the owner of the house had quietly moved out. They lived now in the hallway, available, efficient, and homeless in their own dwelling. There is a version of you that existed before the role arrived, before you became indispensable, before the weight of other people's uncertainty was routinely deposited with you for safekeeping. That version had preferences that were not filtered through usefulness, fears that were not suppressed in order to model courage for someone else, questions that were allowed to remain open rather than closed prematurely, because open questions are a luxury available only to people who are not currently holding everything together. The Stoics did not regard the recovery of that self as selfishness. They regarded it as the single most important moral task a person could undertake. Because a self that has been fully replaced by a role cannot practice virtue, it can only practice function. And function without the self beneath it is not philosophy. It is machinery. What you became, the reliable, composed, never needing, always available version, that is not the height of Stoic character. That is the distortion of it. The Stoic ideal is not a person who has eliminated their own needs. It is a person who has learned to meet those needs from the inside rather than the outside, and who has therefore stopped requiring others to fill the gap. That is a fundamentally different project from simply not asking. What ownership actually means. The Stoic word for self-possession is not a word about emotion management. It is a word about property. What belongs to you? What is genuinely, legally, philosophically yours in a universe that reserves the right to take almost everything else back? Epictetus, who had been enslaved, who had experienced the physical removal of freedom, spoke about this without sentimentality. He did not say, "You will feel better once you reclaim yourself." He said, "Without the self, you are not present. You are a function, a service, a resource, and no amount of admiration from the people you serve changes what you have become in the absence of the self beneath the service." Self-ownership begins with a specific act of recognition, not an act of rebellion, not a dramatic announcement that things are changing, simply the recognition that your judgments, your values, your interior responses to what happens to you, these are yours. They cannot be given to someone else without your consent. But consent can be given passively. It can be given through years of simply not contesting the arrangement. The moment you recognize that you have been consenting passively, that you have been allowing the interior space to be colonized by other people's needs and expectations without ever formally agreeing to it, is the moment the Stoic work begins. Not the moment everything changes. The moment you see clearly what the actual situation has been. Seeing clearly is not comfortable. Epictetus never promised comfort. He promised something more durable, accuracy. And an accurate understanding of your own situation is the only ground on which anything real can be rebuilt. Teaching 5. The return is not a rupture. There is a fear underneath all of this that the Stoics addressed with characteristic directness. It is the fear that returning to yourself necessarily means abandoning the people who have come to depend on your performance. That reclaiming your interior life means breaking something, a relationship, a responsibility, a version of yourself that others have built their own stability around. Musonius Rufus rejected this framing entirely. He argued that a person who returns to their own character does not become less available to others. They become more genuinely available. Because the availability is no longer a performance of strength, they do not actually feel. It is the offering of a person who is present, truly present, with their own self intact, rather than the offering of a role that is running on diminishing reserves. The Stoics were not individualists in the modern sense. They believed deeply in duty, in community, in the obligations that bind us to other people. But they were clear that duty performed from an empty self is not virtue, it is depletion. And a depleted person is not a reliable source of anything, not strength, not wisdom, not the steady presence others genuinely need. Returning to yourself is not a rupture, it is a repair, and the repair is not only yours. The people who believed they needed the performance, many of them needed something else entirely. They needed you, whole, present, and grounded in your own character. The performance was never what they required. It was simply what was available. Begin where the Stoics always begin, not with a declaration, not with a dramatic withdrawal, but with a single question asked inward, quietly, before the day resumes. Is this response mine, or is it the role speaking? One question, one breath, every time. That is not a revolution. It is a daily act of returning to a place that was always yours, and that you are under no obligation to have vacated. The invisible labor was real. The cost was real. And the self that was slowly displaced by it, that is real too. It is not gone. It was never gone. It was waiting, with the patience that the Stoics always said was the mark of something built to last. You do not have to perform strength for anyone today. You only have to be present to what is actually yours. If this moved you, comment "The Citadel holds" below. It is our sign that you carry the philosophy with you. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.